How many of you have heard about this before you came in here this morning? Raise your hand. Okay. If you haven't heard about it, raise your hand. Some of you have, and that's okay. Listen, sometimes it's good not to hear about things. But I'm excited about this protocol, and I'll tell you that when I first read it, I wasn't really excited about it. And I kind of felt like, well, what in the world happened? What's going on here? Because, we had those 3 plans. I spent all that time talking to you about that on that Sunday a few weeks ago. But I've spent a good bit of time since then on the phone in conversations with Keith Boyette, who's the WCA president, with other pastors in our church. I've read more than I wanted to read, comments and blogs and other people, weighing in on the impact of this and how it got to be where it is. But the more time I have spent with this and with people that were involved in putting this together, the 16, I'm feeling better about it. And in fact, I would say I would support this protocol. So I want to give you the basics of it. We got a PowerPoint, I think. I want to share with you the basics of this new development. And it is called the Protocol of Reconciliation and Grace through Separation. So here's what has taken place. 16 people were identified to represent all of the different advocacy groups that are involved in the issue that is before us as a United Methodist Church. It was started by Bishop Yambasu from Sierra Leone, of course, that's in Africa, and it's kind of it was kind of strange that he would bring this option up and pull together these people, but he did, and he brought together other bishops. He brought together folks that represent these advocacy groups that fall under the traditionalist, the centrist, and the progressive camps. And they got together to talk about the fact that the sense is among most people that a separation is going to happen. But there are problems with all of the plans that have been proposed now. So what if we got together and agreed on some possibilities that we would present to General Conference in 2020. So that's what happened. And they brought in Kenneth Feinberg. I don't know if you know him. I didn't know anything about him. But Kenneth Feinberg is one of the top attorneys probably in the world. And they approached him. Here's the interesting thing about him. He's Jewish. And so he has no real stake in the whole thing. But we were laughing yesterday in our meeting with the bishop. We were saying, isn't it interesting that once again a Jew's going to lead us forward? Isn't that cool? And so Kenneth Feinberg did this. He normally, in order to engage him as an attorney, you would be paying thousands of dollars per hour. I mean, this guy's high class attorney. He did help mediate the 9/11. He did mediate the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund. You can go look at his resume if you want to. It's available out there somewhere. Incredible. So they pulled together these 16 folks, and they brought in some other people. The bishop decided to bring in a few other bishops. Bishop Jones from Florida came. Other bishops were invited. A few other people were invited from the different advocacy groups, and they whittled it down to 16 from that. And so they got together, and they spent 9 days in mediation. And as Keith Boyette told us Thursday, he said, and told us last Saturday, he said that we would start in the morning at like 8 o'clock, and we would finish at 7 o'clock at night. And he said, I want you to know this was the most contentious, it was the most difficult thing that he has ever been. He's an attorney, Keith Boyette, the president of WCA. He's an attorney who became an elder. He and I are kindred spirits. We were talking about that yesterday or Thursday. And so he said it was a battle from the beginning. And when we first got started, the tension in the room was just you could cut it with a knife. It was horrible. And so he said, but Kenneth Feinberg, being a good mediator, he kept talking to us about what are the essentials that we want to accomplish, and what do y'all want to accomplish, and what do you want to accomplish, and where can we meet somewhere in the middle. And so there were times, Keith said, there were times when the progressives wanted to walk out, there were times when the centrists wanted to walk out, there were times when the bishops wanted to walk out, and certainly the traditionalists. He said, but a good mediator says, hold on, let's wait a minute. Listen, do you want to throw away all this time and effort when we have the possibility of resolving this once and for all? So they come back in. And he said that it was not until the 9th day, at the end of the day, that they finally were able to say, okay, we're going to do this. And it was because of the mediator's push to say, listen, if you don't do this, here are the opportunities, here are the options out there, and you're just going to keep fighting this issue over and over and over and again. So all of the folks there unanimously agreed on this proposal. And here's one highlight. It says the United Methodist Church and its members aspire to multiply Methodist mission in the world by restructuring the church through respectful and dignified separation. It's kind of this is what we want to do, and we all recognize that. And then the other one is this: we propose restructuring the United Methodist Church by separation as the best means to resolve our differences, allowing each part of the church to remain true to its theological understanding while recognizing the dignity, equality, integrity, and respect of every person. I like that. Let's shake hands and go separate ways while we still can. And so you can see the spirit of this, and that's the way they have presented it. So here's the nutshell version of it. Here's what it does. It allows the separation of the United Methodist Church into 2 or more denominations. Now notice I said 2 or more. The 2 that are the main ones obviously are what they are calling a traditional expression or a traditional branch of the Methodist Church, which the WCA has been preparing to launch if need be. Now, here's the thing about the WCA. The WCA, if this were to pass and this were to go through, the WCA would provide the mechanism for the beginning of a traditional Methodist church. But the WCA at that point evaporates. This will not be the WCA. They're not the people that have been putting this together are not the ones that it's going to be their church. Are you following me on that? It's going to become the church, just like our church is now, of the people. So it will be a traditional expression of Methodism. The other is what they're calling in the document the post-separation UMC. So this will be the centrist progressive side of this of our denomination. And so there's also the opportunity for folks that aren't happy with either of those 2 sides to go create another denomination under this protocol. So it could be 2 or more expressions. Under this protocol, the annual conference, that's important, the annual conference and the local churches, Park Avenue being a local church, can vote to affiliate with one of the new Methodist denominations. You could actually have a vote at our annual conference in June. If this thing passes in May at general conference, we go to annual conference in Columbus in June, and we could vote there as a conference. Where would we want to land? If, for some reason, the annual conference were to choose a denomination that we as a church were not comfortable with, then we could have a vote that we would like to affiliate with one of the other denominations, or even other Methodist entities like Free Methodist or whatever may be out there. Or the church could say, we just want to be Park Avenue Community Church under a Wesleyan banner and just be independent. There are all kinds of options. So it opens the door for all of that, and that's a positive. Here are the nuts and bolts of the vote. An annual conference vote must be supported by 57% of those voting. That was a compromise. There were those in the 16 group who wanted it to be a 2/3 vote, and there were those who wanted it to be a majority vote. And so working with Keith Feinberg, one of the last, not Keith, what's his first name? Kenneth. What they they had to come to this compromise at the last minute. And so 57% of the voting is what they settled on for an annual conference in the United States to make this vote. If less than 50%, if they don't get a 50% vote on that, so that means there's no decision to go with any of these branches, new branches, then by default, that conference remains in what is being called the post-separation UMC, the progressive centrist version of it. So it's like that becomes the default. So if South Georgia is not able to get a 57% vote to become part of the traditional branch, then we will by default become part of the post-separation UMC. Not sure what name they're going to call that, but that's what it's called in the document. Local churches, as I said a minute ago, they can vote to affiliate with either denomination. And here's the interesting thing about that. The church council, or in our case, the administrative council, decides whether the vote required to make that move is a majority or 2/3. And there's a lot of dynamics I won't get into there, but that could impact a number of churches when it comes to the vote. And if they can't get the 2/3, they by default become part of the UMC post-separation. Yes. Yes.
If the annual conference votes to go one way or the other, does the local church have to vote?
No. That's a good question. No. So for instance, I shouldn't put my foot up there. If, for instance, sorry about that. Yeah, so, sorry about that, Lord. If the annual conference votes, let's just say in our situation, we feel like our church is pretty conservative, traditionalist, but not exclusive of others, and we love all people. I mean, we know where we are. If the conference does that vote, then we don't have to vote. We just become part of that. But if we don't like that, then we vote to come out of it. Does that make sense, Walter? So it's important. I mean, I think ideally what most people would want in this instance is the annual conference to make a decision so that you don't have to have a vote in the local church. Because we know, even here, I mean, we have people who obviously feel differently than we do theologically, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we want to love all people, but when you make people choose, are we going to do this or we're not going to do this? In a lot of churches, for instance, my previous church in Mulberry, that would be very hard for them to vote because they're more like probably, 51%, 48%. I mean, they're very theologically diverse, and so that could split the church. And so the effort here by this 16 is let's keep the vote at the annual conference level and not make churches have to make the decision. And so that's where they were going with this move, and I think that's the right move. But there are going to be churches that are going to have to vote because there are going to be churches. Even let's just say the South Georgia Conference decides to follow the traditional route. I mean, we know we got plenty of churches in the South Georgia Conference that don't agree with that, and so in order for them to leave the South Georgia Conference, the Methodist expression of traditional theology, they're going to have to take a vote in the church. Some of them have already voted. You know that? Some of the progressive churches, I've told you that before, have already voted, and they do plan to leave. So the effort there was to try to avoid a vote in a local church, but it's likely that that's going to happen in some local churches. All right, you have to do the vote. The church council agrees to have a vote, then you have to take the vote within 60 days at a church conference. So here's the deal. Jimmy doesn't make the decision. I'm not even sure I get a vote because I'm a member of the annual conference. But the church council, church conference, so it'd be a church-wide vote, all present that are there for that particular vote, if it should ever come to that. If no vote, then it becomes part of the post-separation UMC. There's a window here that, a church could sit and wait 4 years to make a decision on that if you wanted to. They're saying we don't want to hurry everybody. Some people are ready to make a decision, some are not. Some want to see how it falls out. So we're going to give them a window there under this plan that they could wait and later on opt to go with one of the other folks. Okay? And that's bizarre because there's so many factors in here of what happens after General Conference, and I'll touch on that in just a minute. Central Conferences, those are Africa, Philippines, Eurasia, any place, Central America, the places outside of the United States primarily, they're required to do a 2/3 vote. I think the reason for that is because most of those are strongly traditional, and so they don't think that they would have a problem getting a 2/3 vote. So the Africans that were part of this protocol mediation felt like that was not a problem for them, so they agreed to that. If no vote, though, in those central conferences, they become part of the separation. So you understand what happens. If you don't vote or you don't get enough votes to make a decision on one of these, you by default become part of the UMC post-separation church, which is the progressive centrist version. It's really more progressive than centrist. Here's the best thing of this whole protocol: property and assets. Conferences and churches that decide to leave get to take their property with them without penalty. That is major, 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 major. In fact, the estimate from Keith Boyette and others that were part of the 16 was that the value of that, in terms of the value of all the property, if you add it all up, it was like, I forgot, it's in the billions. That's how much property value there is out there in all the United Methodist churches. And so for there to be an agreement that we could do that, churches can do that, was a major, major step, because you remember that the centrist progressives would provide for a way for traditionalists to leave, but it was punitive. You would have to pay. In fact, even under our current disaffiliation policy that we passed at annual conference last year, in order for Park Avenue to leave, we would have to pay 1.5 years of our apportionments, which would come up to about $300,000, and then we would have to pay the pension liability figure, which we looked at that, and it's another $190,000. So for Park Avenue, under the current status of it, to pull out, we would have to come up with $500,000, a little bit better than that, to take our property and leave. Under this provision, you don't have to pay a dime. You don't have to pay a dime. So that's a major, major, major factor in this. Just so you know, financial agreements, there was an audit done of the assets of the United Methodist Church at large, and I had been told, and we had understood in the past, that there was somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion in assets. And that's probably true, but there was an audit done recently, and this was confirmed by Derek McAleer at our meeting yesterday with the bishop. The actual number of unrestricted funds totals somewhere about $120 million. It's not nearly what we thought it was. And so $25 million of that would come to help the traditional church get started. $39 million of that will be set aside for the churches like those in Africa and in Asia and other places like that, because they've been depending on the United Methodist Church to support their ministries, and this is the buffer that they need to continue. So basically, of the and this was something, just so you'll know, the $39 million was something that was negotiated because the traditionalists wanted to allocate $60 million for these other partners around the world. But the progressives didn't want to do that, so they ended up compromising on $39 million. That's a big figure. The agreement also says, the protocol also says that there will be a moratorium, there will be a stay on charges being brought, and, well, not charges being brought, but trying to prosecute violations of the Book of Discipline, which is happening, as we know, in a large number of places in the United Methodist Church. So they're saying, basically, we're going to stop that until the end of the General Conference 2020. Here are the things that have to fall in place before we can get this vote to the General Conference. The Judicial Council, our Supreme Court kind of thing, they will review this plan and see if it's good, see if there are any constitutional issues or other issues. They will do that before we go to General Conference in 2020. They will also get our finance folks to look at it, make sure there are no issues that these 16 and others, very bright people, have explored. They will ask that this vote would move to the top of the agenda in Minneapolis in May, so that this would be one of the very first things. The first day is a day of worship. The second day, they would hope that there would be a vote on this protocol. This is an interesting development that will come out hopefully in the next 10 days. Discovered this in the last 2 days. In the next 10 days, what the expectation is from these 16 is that every single advocacy group that is part of this mediated peace, and it goes all the way on the spectrum. that every single one of those advocacy groups will come out with a statement saying that their advocacy groups fully support this protocol going forward. That means that all these other plans that these different factions have presented for General Conference will not even be a factor anymore. You'll just withdraw those in essence and present this one alone. There's a question of whether the Council of Bishops will endorse this plan, this protocol. I'm not sure whether they'll do that or not. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing, because they endorsed the one church plan and that backfired on them. So, but I think it would be helpful if the Council of Bishops says, yes, we too support the protocol, which means it would pass. Now, here's what happens immediately after. And this is important. What happens immediately after? Let's say protocol comes up for vote on day 2 of General Conference. Then the next, and it's passed. The very next order of business would be to call for the Council of Bishops to call the first session of the post-separation UMC to organize itself into this regional conference. It'll become the United States Progressive Regional Conference. Then what they will do immediately after they create that entity, the regional conference, they will then call for the first session of that regional conference to meet to repeal the traditional plan and all other portions relating to the LGBTQ persons, the things that the traditional plan was opposed to. And so immediately there in Minneapolis, that will go into effect if this plan passes. Won't affect us, locally, because we still have our annual conference to vote and decide. But there'll be a lot of news coverage on that. That'll be a big event that happens then. Just wanted you to be aware of that. Here are my thoughts. Nothing's been approved yet. There's a good chance that this proposal will continue to gain traction. There's a lot of support for it out across the lines. Our annual conference could affiliate, I call it the WCA, but with the new traditional expression, if that's what the annual conference wanted to do, or it could align with some other traditional leaning annual conferences. And so that's kind of where we are. Here's what I'd say, and I've been saying to us all along: keep praying, stay informed, help others know, ask questions, talk to each other, share your thoughts with others. But the main thing is in bold print there: keep loving others. We've got to do that. We've got to do that, because love is what we are known for. And so those are the things we have to do. Now, I know you probably have a lot of questions about that. I've seen a lot of posts with a lot of questions about it, and I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know that we want to do it this morning and take up the time that we need to do the other things, but I'm welcome to come to your Sunday school class. I'm welcome to talk to you personally about it. I'll just throw out a couple of things that have seem to be rising to the top in questions and concerns. 2 things come up. One is, it seems like the traditionalists have sold out our position. We were the majority at General Conference, and now we have capitulated. We have given in to the progressives, and they win. I'm hearing that over and over and over again. There's probably some validity to it. But having been a lawyer and having gone through mediation, many of our lawyers in here have done that too. You understand that at a mediation, a lot of times there is compromise that has to happen in order to resolve the issue, in order to end the case, to put the case to bed. And this is the best plan. This is the best way to do that. And you know what? If somebody had to give up a little something extra in order to put it to bed, and let's get about the business of loving people and letting them know who Jesus Christ is, I'm okay with it. This is the only option that we have, because other than this, there's a good possibility that nothing happens at GC 2020, and we end up fighting this issue on and on and on and on and on. And so I can tell you this: Tom Berlin was on this panel of the 16. He is a centrist, probably leans towards progressive somewhere up in the mid north, and he says, he was talking to Jim Cowart, our delegation head. He said, "You will not believe the grief that I'm catching from people that are on our side of this issue, that we sold out to the traditionalists." And then Keith Boyette is saying, "Yeah, man, people really feel like that. But once I explain to them that this is the best option that we have going forward. Plus, the greatest thing is it allows people who are unhappy to take their property without penalty. That's major. And so it's a good thing for us all. The other thing that I've heard is what's going to happen with the UMC name. There are a few people that care about that out there. And right now, it looks like in the protocol, that name will go with the post-separation progressive centrist side of this whole thing. But that's still in negotiation. That's not completely done. It may be that it comes out that it's available for whoever wants to use it. There will be amendments made to this protocol. It will be vetted. It will be amended. There will be new things added to it to tweak it and make it stronger. But right now, it looks like that's the main one going forward. Okay? And it looks like it's going to catch a lot of traction. The final thing I want to say about all this is in yesterday's meeting, we met with Bishop Bryan and the top 20 in little old Mogi State Park in McRae. And while we were there, one option that was tossed around was the idea of South Georgia just pulling out and being its own thing. And there was some support for that. There was some opposition for that. Not sure what that would look like. What does it mean? There are a lot of unanswered questions there. And so that's out there. It's floating. I don't know whether that's going to gain traction or not. I don't know that I'm particularly supportive of that right now because of the unknowns. And what does that look like going forward? So anyway, I just wanted you to know that that's out there too. All right, here's what I want you to do. Breathe, okay? We're okay. We're okay. And we're going to continue to do what we're doing. And, in some ways, I do have a little grief. Is that the right word? I grieve a little bit of the fact that, I'm probably going to lose some friends in our conference because there are going to be some friends in our conference that are going to go a different way than I'm going. And they're good friends of mine. And I grieve that. In some way, I grieve that the United Methodist Church kind of seems to be going away and going in a direction that I wouldn't have particularly, been super excited about. But more than anything else, what I'm about is I want to pursue Jesus. I want to keep our focus on Jesus, and I don't want to worship the United Methodist Church or the traditional Methodist Church or any other church. I want to worship Jesus. And I think as long as we do that and keep our focus there and pushing forward, then the waves and the winds aren't going to be a problem. We keep going. And God's going to honor that. And we're going to see what we're seeing now. We're seeing continued growth in our church. We've had almost 100 folks join since we've been here. I know you had a bunch join before then. I mean, there's people love this church because these people love people and they love Jesus. And that's what we need to do. Keep doing that. All right, you good? Okay. I think that's all I got.